Welcome back, guys. What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Great to have you here. Today we're going to be stripping down this SR20 DET out of a GTIR, seeing what's in it, seeing how it's put together, and you're going to come along for the journey. Anyway, stay tuned and let's get to it. Okay, so to strip apart an SR20 DET, we don't need a huge amount of tools, just the basics. So we've got a 12 and a 10. This is for the head bolts, and another 10mm. We've got a 28mm impact for the front pulley, and just some basic sockets. So yeah, if you do want to have a go at this yourself, you don't need a massive amount of tools. Most things come apart pretty easy. Anyway, let's go across to the motor and start pulling it down. Okay, so we have a long block which is assembled here. So we want to take off the rocker cover, we want to take off the intake manifold and the exhaust manifold. Now this is all just sitting here loosely in preparation for the video, but normally you just have a whole bunch of 10mm running right around the rocker cover, which you would just take off, and then the rocker cover pops off. Down here you have 14mm in general, which are attached to the studs in the head. So you undo all of those and that pops off. And over here with the intake you have studs coming out of the head which have 12mm on them, which all come off, and off it comes. Now obviously these cars are 30 years old and you might find that some of these bolts and nuts are different, but in general 14, 12 and 10. So I'll pull all this off now and we'll have the motor exposed so we can have a look inside it and I can start showing you what you need to pull out. Okay, so we're left with the motor with no exhaust manifold or intake manifold or rocker cover on it. Now this motor, I've actually already taken the cylinder head off because this motor blew in our gold GTIR and I needed to diagnose what was wrong with the motor. So I pulled the cylinder head off in car, but I have reassembled the cams and the cam caps so I can show you how to disassemble the head. So the only things that are different are I haven't reset the cam chain on top of the cam gears, and I haven't reset the cam chain tensioner, which sits down here. So we will just take a quick look at this and run through it. We'll take the cam caps off, and we will take the camshafts out, have a look at the valve train, and pull the cylinder head off, and we'll run through how you do all of that. Okay, now normally this cam chain would sit over our cam gears on either side and be tensioned on. And what's holding that tension on the chain across these cam gears is this little unit here. So this is your cam chain tensioner. So that's bolted in with two 10mm and it's pushed up against the cam chain inside the motor. Now best practice before you take your cam caps off and start mucking around is to pop this out. So you just undo these two 10mm and pull this out and you'll lose all of the tension off your cam chain. So we put that to one side. And now our cam chain will be loose. So we can now take off our cam caps. Now you don't want to get these mixed out of order. So it's very important that all these cam caps go back in the same place as when they are disassembled. So if you're taking your car to an engine rebuilder, even still, just mark out which side your intake, which side your exhaust, and then put all these in a line and make sure they all go back in the same way. Basically these cams have a metal on metal surface in here. These all line up perfectly and they've all been line bored to be in sync with each other. So if you start mixing them up, you may run into trouble with early wear on camshafts and bits and pieces moving around. You don't want that in the cylinder head. So yeah, just keep them all in the same order, assemble them all back in the same order, and everything will be sweet. Okay, so these are all 10mm that hold the cam caps on. We're just going to take it off with a 10mm gun just to speed the process up. So once all these are ready to come out, all your cam caps and your cams are ready to pop out, I like to get a little unit like this, or just a container, or even just a bench top, and I like to write I for intake and E for exhaust, just so I know which sides come from where, and obviously mark out which side's which as well, so whether it's from number 1 side or from number 4 side that I'm looking at, so I know which way it goes all back together. Yeah, just to keep track of what I'm doing. So we'll do that now. There we go. Okay, so our cam caps are now off, and that exposes the camshafts, which can now come out. So your chain's off, your cam caps are off, and you've got your camshafts exposed, which we can now remove. So this is the intake. And our exhaust. There we go. So now we have our camshafts out. Okay, so we have our head exposed with our rockers exposed, and we can see we have our valves, our valve retainers, our rocker arms with our shims. So basically these shims, because the GTIR head is mechanical, these shims make up the tolerance between the camshaft and the rocker, and the bigger or smaller you make these determines the gap between the top of this rocker and the camshaft. So when you hear someone saying shimming a head, they're talking about replacing all of these shims and buckets to make the gap between the rocker and the cams more or less. And if you get that nice and tight, then you stop that real tappity noise that you hear in GTIRs. I mean, it's always going to be there because it's got a mechanical driven head. They're not hydraulic lifters like the other SR20 DETs out of Sylvia's, but you can reduce it an awful lot. So what I'll do now is pull the cylinder head off the block and put it to one side, because what we're really after is to take apart that bottom end. Now we would normally take the cylinder head off, we would take all the head bolts out, and they are normally down all of these holes, which you can see here. So I've already taken these out simply because, like I said, I diagnosed this motor earlier. Now to do that, it is quite difficult, especially if it's your first time. They're in really tight. They're torqued down. I think, I can't actually remember the torque settings right off the top of my head, but yeah, you've got to put a bit of effort in to get in them out. And you do that with this tool here, which goes into the top, and yeah, you remove the head bolts like that. Alright, so we got the head off now, which exposes our metal head gasket. So we want to pull that off and put that to one side, and then we can flip the motor over and start undoing the sump and the lower sump and access the pistons, the rods and the crank. Now is also a great time to take off your crank pulley. I've already pulled this off with a pulley puller, which you wind into here, push on here, and it pops the pulley off. So that's where your 28mm is going to come into play, and you just undo this big main bolt, and the crank pulley just pops off. So now we've got no front crank pulley either. Now this is where we make a massive mess. Okay, so we now have the bottom of the motor exposed. So we've got a whole bunch of 10 mils to take off around the sump, and then a whole bunch of 12 mils around the bottom sump. So we'll get all these off. So we'll get this off and get this off, and that will expose our crank, our rods, and our pistons. Okay, once you've got out all the 10 mil bolts around the sump, just give it a lift, and she comes off. There we go, and that exposes our main oil pickup. So that picks all the oil up from the inside of your sump and sucks it up into the motor. So we need to pull all this assembly off as well, and then we can pull the main bottom sump off. Okay, so we've got two 12 mils down here, and there's a 10 mil right here that needs to come off, and then this piece will pull out as well. Now, like I said, this piece here sits in here, and it's your oil pickup, and there's actually a mesh on the inside of it, and that prevents anything that you don't want in your motor not going in. And well, I can hear something rattling around in here. That is not what we want to see. Coming out of our oil return. Our pickup. Nice big bit of metal. That actually looks like a piece of a shim, to be honest. Yeah, that is. It's a piece of a shim, but all my shims are in the motor, so this must have been from a previous experience this motor's had. Alright, now we've got the oil pickup out. What we're going to do is take the bottom sump off. So this is held in with a whole bunch of 12 mils. Be very careful when you're doing this, because there's also a whole bunch of 12 mils inside the sump. So if you're under your car and you want to take this big bottom main sump off, you can't just undo the bolts around the outside. You need to take the secondary oil sump off and undo all of these bolts that sit inside here. I've seen people try and pry these off before without undoing these bolts, and they just bend and wreck everything. So yeah. We'll get all these off and we'll go from there. Okay, so we got all the bolts out, and the last two nuts are on the back here, and if your motor's still in the car and you're trying to attempt to take this off while it's in the car, you have to take this inspection plate off and reach through here into where the gearbox is mounted onto the car and take these two off. And those are the last two to hold this whole assembly on. Hopefully that helps someone from wrecking a lower sump. Okay, so all our bolts are out. Now, after doing this, there's a couple of little places you can pry this bar off. So you can put a screwdriver in here and pry it up a little bit. That ain't going to do any damage. You can put a little screwdriver in here and just pry that up. And that just pulls this back end up and makes this really easy to take off. So I'll lift this off now and we'll keep going. Okay, so we're now left with the crank exposed. Caps, the main caps, which sit in here and hold all your bearings together and hold the crankshaft in place. So the Nissan Pulsar Gtir had this fitted into it, which is really good, because it just sort of stops things from distorting around and moving. But yeah, it means we have to pull all the main cap bolts out and lift this out as a unit. And then, yeah, we can have a look at the rods and the pistons and take a look at the crankshaft. So yeah, we'll pull this out and we'll go from there. So here we go. This is with the main cap off. So we have our crankshaft spinning in here, our main caps holding our bearings together, and then we've got our rods with our rod bearings that sit inside and attached to our con rods, which are down in there. So yeah, I was told this was a 2.2 litre. It definitely isn't. This is all factory stuff. We've got factory rods. Looks like we may even have factory rod bolts, but we'll see when we pull them out. Oh, there might be ARP actually. And definitely forged pistons. I can see shiny forged pistons in there. So it's clearly been rebuilt. It's clearly it's a very, very clean motor. So it's had a lot of oil changes in its life. It's not all clogged up. So it's really good to see that, you know, whoever's, like, you know, over the years, the people that have had this motor have looked after it. Unfortunately, yeah, it doesn't have the 2.2. We got factory rods and forged pistons, so we were making close to 500 horsepower out of this motor. Pretty lucky one of the rods didn't let go and go through the block. These things are generally alright to about 500 horse, the stock GTIR rods. They're pretty strong. So she's still spinning pretty freely. Quite nice. Yeah, obviously the problem with this motor is one of these cylinders has expanded. So it's now oval shape. It's no longer 87mm, it's now about 90mm across. So yeah, not the one. But no, it spins over quite nice. So you can see here, this bearing's down to the copper. It's got a nice gouge in it, so it's really starting to wear out. So this motor was getting close to making some knock-knock noises. That one's the same, down to the copper. Cool. Okay, so we've got all 4 pistons out of the bore now, so we can inspect all the pistons, take a look at all of the skirtings on them, and also have a look at the bore liner. At the same time, we can take the oil pump off, the water pump, and take the front cover off, take the back cover off, and then we can lift the crankshaft out as well, and inspect all of the bearing surfaces on that as well. Yeah, these are all forged pistons. All factory rods. The bearings on all the con rods don't actually seem to be too bad, but the main bearings have taken a bit of a beating, which isn't unusual for a GTIR, to be fair. Yeah, so yeah, we'll keep on stripping down and yeah, keep going. Alright, so we've got the oil pump off the front now, which exposes our crank and the crank collar with our cam chain and the cam chain guides, which sit up in here. Water pump is off. Crank is exposed, and on the other side, the front main crank seal has also been taken off. So now the crank will just lift on out and out of the block. And this is the last component to come out of the block. Then it's just a stripped down bare short block. So yeah, that's all good. So yeah, we're running out of space at the moment. Got our head stuff up in here, sump and all of that business there, our 4 pistons, our crank girdle, our oil pump and front housing, and then the rear main seal as well for the crank, our water pump, all the bolts from the outside of the motor. Yeah, so I think we do a bit of a cleanup, and I'll get that crank pulled out of there, and then this bare block, I need to make my mind up what I want to do with it. And there's our cam chain. Alright, let's lift the crank out. So the motor's all disassembled, crankshaft's out. You can see our piston squirters in here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Little baffling plate in the corner. and these are our big ends along here. They actually don't look too bad, to be fair, except for that one. That one's got a big crease through it. And there's our crank, all out of the car. So I'll get these back in and this back in, and yeah, go from there. Well, where to from here with this block, with its expanded cylinder? I don't feel great about throwing away 54C blocks. Now, I did look in the Nissan listings, and it said that you can get a complete bare block, so the crank main caps plus the block, for $2,200 off Nissan, so $2,200. So I need to weigh up whether I put Dalton sleeves in this block to repair it, or I take it to the scrap man. What do you guys think? Put in the comments below. Should I take this to the scrap man? Am I wasting my time putting Dalton sleeves in this? I will take it down to High Tech Motors, to Dick down there. He's who I've always used to do my machining. So I'll take it down to him and ask, you know, like pricing, what he thinks, if the block's salvageable. Yeah. I think we go from there, get a price, weigh up our options. Like I said, I don't like throwing away 54C blocks, but this one might have done its last up and down. So yeah, what do you guys think? Put in the comments below what I should do. Should I just throw this away? Should I put Dalton sleeves in it? Does anyone out there want it in New Zealand? Like, I'll be willing to sell this if someone does want it. I don't realistically need more motors lying around my shed. So let me know in the comments what you think, and yeah, we'll figure it out. Okay, so what we can see here is the number 4 piston. Now, number 4 cylinder was the one that had expanded from 87mm to like a very oval 90mm. And you can see that it's done some damage to the skirt on the piston. So this forged piston is no good. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to take the circlips out and I'll pull the rod off. I'll number the rod and wrap it up like I've done with the rest of the pistons and rods. For safekeeping, I oil them all down and put them into Glad wrap. I've also done that with the crankshaft. Yeah, just as I thought, I gave those piston circlips a bit too much of a flick with the old pick. They've gone flying through the shed, so I guess I'll have a job of finding them. But that's the gudgeon pin, the piston, and the rod. So I'll number that and get that all wrapped up, because there's nothing wrong with the rod. But this piston is rubbish. I'll just take a measurement of it and write it on the top, because maybe we can actually make a full set again. I'll see if, I think this is a CP, I'll see if CP will just machine one piston, because there's no point throwing away a full set when we've already got 3, right? Anyway, so there you go. Thanks for mucking around with me in the garage this afternoon, pulling all this stuff out of the SR20 det from our Pulsar Gtir. Hopefully you've had a good time, it's been entertainment, or you've actually learned something, or it's been useful in your own endeavours to pull one of these apart. So yeah, once again, what would you guys do? Would you get rid of this, or would you keep it as a spare? Like I said, pretty expensive to do anything with. I'm still trying to make my mind up. So comment below, let me know what you'd do. Yeah, if you like this type of content, also let me know, give it a thumbs up, because I'm not sure if you guys want to see this stuff in the shed, but if you do, yeah, let me know, because I enjoy it and it's what I'm always in here doing. Just slows me down a bit filming it. So yeah, once again, if you made it this far, like, comment, subscribe. Great to see you all here, and we'll see you next time.